Good morning all. It's about 2 degrees above freezing at the moment, but they say it's going to be a nice day, so I'm out for a stroll and I'm starting at Ufford Church to be exact. The plan is to do some sort of circular route that goes around the edges of Helpston, Bainton. I think there's a place called Ashton somewhere in the middle of it all, and if we get it right it's Bainton back to Ufford again. The day started not too well because my internet's down at home, which means I can't print the map off with the route that I'm supposed to be following. So I'm pretty sure I can do it without a map, but that could be very dodgy pronouncement there. So there's a scope for getting lost, as there always is on my walks, but I'm relatively confident, and I should find a few things of interest. There's a number of things on maps that I either don't understand and I'm curious as to what they are, or bits that I do understand and can share with you. So yeah, starting off at Ufford Church. It's cold, but it's going to be a good day, they say, so I'm happy with that. Ufford Church is another of those, I think they call them redundant churches, might be the wrong word, but it's no longer used. It was sort of closed down by the Church of England in 2011, I think it was. They still use it for various events and various services of one type or another, but it's not as it were an active Church of England church anymore, but it's being looked after by those that look after redundant churches. It's quite a small church, but a very packed graveyard. Dates back to 1200s, mainly 1300s. It's always caught my eye whenever I've passed through Ufford because it sits on top of a hill. Obviously we don't have many hills around this part of the world, so it kind of stands out. It's a nice church, makes you wonder why it closed down, but I guess there just wasn't enough people using it. Going to wander back down the hill now from the church, and we're going to walk past the old Rectory, which is a cracking building, as you'll see, and it dates back a good 600 to 700 years, especially the centre bit. The two bits on the side are more recent add-ons, but the centre bit really does go back a long way. What was known as an old hall house, because of its design. It was, rather than multiple rooms, it was one gigantic room, almost like a church hall. Going to wander down, you'll see. Going to be fighting with the sun again this morning. There you go, it's a fantastic building. The old Rectory. That centre bit is extremely old. A lovely old water pump in the garden. I assume that's original. Wonderful building. The buildings on the right as we climb out of Offord used to belong to Newport Farm. It was a very large farm at this top end of Offord, or bottom end of Offord. Dates back to the 1700s. And most of these buildings are now sort of converted residences, but try and look at that date stamp on the wall. It's actually in Roman numerals, but I'm told it says 1770. They're old stables, old barns. I love these ventilation slots. I've got a thing about ventilation slots, as you know. ventilation lunettes they're apparently known as, which just means semicircular shape. Right, climbed out of Ufford now. Thankfully we've turned back on ourselves and got the sun behind us now, because walking into that sun was a real pain. Not that I don't like the sun, but yeah, it's at this time of the year, it's so low in the sky, yeah, it's not easy. I was hoping to clamber into these woods on the left, but I can't. It's very heavily wired off. Marked on the maps as stone pits. I'm always curious about these sort of places, and there's nothing to see. But yeah, they were small stone pits. They quarried stone out of here, but on a very small scale. Whether it was limestone or some other stone, I don't know. My interest is really that they used to fill these pits in with sort of Victorian, Edwardian rubbish, so the people who collect old bottles, Victorian bottles. This may well have been a Victorian bottle dump, but I can't get in there to actually prove it one way or the other, but I suspect it probably is, and I suspect the owner knows that and doesn't want people coming and digging it up. Not that I would, or even could. But it's certainly heavily wired off. I'd love to go in there and just have a look around. We'll march on. Can you hear that? Silence. Silence apart from countryside sounds. I can do this. You know, no people, no cars. I know it's as thrilling to you watching this as watching an episode of The Masked Singer, but yeah, this is wonderful. I wish I could share it with you better than a camera will, but yeah, blue sky, warm sunshine, nice countryside, and just so peaceful. Lovely. Just about make out Offord Church in the centre, where we started. We've just been on a pretty long route to nowhere, all the way along there, and then back down here. It's the only way I can do this, but it's a nice walk. While I'm wandering along the road, I've had a couple of people that have been in touch and said, why don't you do the city centre in a video like, and yeah, I'd love to do it. I would really. I mean, there's so many YouTube videos saying, you know, I survived a day in hell and I visited the worst city in the UK, and I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot wrong with the Peterborough city centre, absolutely, but there's history in there. If you know where to look, most of you will know that, and I'd love to cover it on a video, but whether it's me or whether it's, I don't know, a reflection of society as I see it, I don't know, but I don't want to walk through the city centre carrying what is in effect a mobile phone with bits added on. I just kind of fear I won't come out the other side with the gear intact, so I'm just not brave enough to do it. If an opportunity arises, and I can't see how or when, I'll do it. And the same applies to some of the suburbs close to the city centre. I would love to do them, I really would love to do them, but I'm not wandering around carrying all this in places that I'm not confident about, so that's probably me more than it is the area's concerned, but that's why I haven't yet done them. Whether I will do them, I don't know, but there's plenty of other places, to be honest, that I prefer to wander in before I do those, such as where we are today. And this will get a bit more lively as we go, but I've got to walk there first, so we will get there. But thanks for getting in touch anyway. Always will listen to any suggestions. Keep them coming. I think this is my footpath. I'm not 100% sure when I'm going to go for it. I'm getting bored of walking on the road, and I've got to cut across to another road. The shape of the path and the direction looks about right from what I can remember. Yeah, we'll have a go. Well, it's the right path, so that's good news considering I've lost my map, or I'm running without a map. This is the right one. We're coming across the road I want to be on. Where are we heading, and where are we nearly at? Well, if you think about Helpston, right, so you're going to Helpston from Peterborough and you go across the big railway crossing and you go into the village of Helpston, straight out the other side, you eventually reach a big right-hander. That's the point we're heading for, where that right-hander is, because that's the medieval settlement, or over the hedgerow, the medieval settlement of Torpel, T-O-R-P-E-L. Now what's that about? Well, it's all Norman conquest stuff again. When William the Conqueror came over, William I, King of England, as he became, I mean, he was a shrewd, I get the impression he was a shrewd operator, because kings back then never lasted too long. As soon as they took the throne, there seemed to be armies marching on them to depose them. And I think William knew that. So he brought a lot of people over with him from his Normandy base in France, and he rewarded them. When they were over here, he allocated land to them, partly as a reward, partly as a, well, if I get into any grief because I've given you this land, you need to give me some fighting men. And he had these people all over the country, which was a pretty good move to take. And the guy who's going to be of interest today is a chap called Roger. Now I'm going to put his name on the screen because there's another pronunciation thing. Roger Infans, Roger Infans, because he would have been French, was one of William's chaps that he brought over, one of his loyal men. And Roger, as we'll call him from this point forward, was allocated a mighty big chunk of Peterborough. I mean, you had the Waterville, the De Waterville and the De Longvilles, they were all pals of William. We've covered those in the Orton video, but Roger was given a lot more land than they were given, from Helpston across to Oundle, various places in between. But he chose Torpel, and he chose the place we're going to as his base. He was the lord of the manor, he needed a manor house, and he built it in this field, in what was Torpel. Now Torpel, as I say, was just a few wooden buildings. There's nothing of significance, it wouldn't even qualify as a village. But that's where he built his first wooden manor house. I think it was about 1130, something like that. People are not 100% clear on the history of it. You can read up online about it, but there's a lot of question marks. Nobody's 100% sure. It's still relatively unknown, or relatively understudied is probably a better phrase. But we think the wooden manor house was replaced with a stone one late in the 1200s, and it basically stayed there and was handed down through Roger's family until around the Black Death, 1348 I think it was, the Black Death, bubonic plague and all that, when it basically vanished, it was wiped out. So that's where we're heading for, is the site of the medieval settlement of Torpel, and that's why we're tracking and zigzagging across all these fields to try and get there. We'll be there soon. You never realise how, I don't know if impressive is the right word, how impressive these pylons are until you get under one, or them. Makes me wonder whether one day, probably not in my lifetime, they'll disappear and we'll move electricity in a completely different way. Torpel Manor Field. Now, you're not going to see anything by way of buildings here. As I say, they vanished, what, 700 years ago. What you can probably see on the camera is ditches and bumps and lumps. And nobody knows 100% what they are, but there were buildings here. Not many, but there were some. The most important one was the manor house, and the manor house was on this plateau in front of us. Just try not to fall over. It was a wooden manor house. I put some illustrations up so you can just get a better idea of what on earth I'm talking about in terms of what was here or what we believe was here. That entranceway would have been just here, which I'm now walking up onto the site. And this would be our Roger's first manor house. That's the Lord of Torpel. Just looking down from his sort of plateau now, there was some sort of ditch. I don't know if it was a moat, I can't remember now. Not being able to print off my map, I can't be certain. But it was a ditch, it was a fortified manor house. It was protected with something, just in case somebody wanted to get up there. Can't really make out what it was, but there was definitely something, a ditch or a moat down there. I should have mentioned a few minutes ago, but didn't, when I was questioning as to why our Roger decided this was a good place to build his manor house. Well, the road we were just walking on was a Roman road. It's now known as King Street. Not a significant Roman road, but it was a Roman road. It sort of ran from Castor and rejoined Ermine Street, which is where it departed from. I think in southern Lincolnshire, or perhaps a bit higher than, so we are in southern Lincolnshire, so a bit further north than that. But it was a short road, and I don't know what the purpose of it was. It just thought it was almost like a bypass, but bypassing nothing. It just ran parallel with Ermine Street, really. Didn't seem to have any great purpose of going from anywhere to anywhere, but it ran alongside this site, and maybe that had a bearing on why our Roger decided this was going to be his HQ. I always think one of the ironies of sites like these, I have come across them before, is that because it's been declared a historical monument site, the historians can't dig here, they can't disturb the surface, so they've had to base so much of what they've been able to work out from bits of pottery that they've picked up off the surface, both here and around this site. But it seems a bit ironic that if they could just dig a little bit a la Time Team, they could understand a lot more about what is here and what was here, but they can't touch it. And I do sense their frustration in some of the stuff that they publish online about that. Has to be done, you can't really go digging it all up, but yeah, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot by getting this declared as a historical monument. Just looking back at the manor house site now, it's a bit, the bank's a bit more raised this side. Shows it off a bit better. Just bumps and lumps everywhere. Would be great to get a more than an illustration, but an actual photograph, which obviously we wouldn't get, of what was here in the 1100s. Well, I'm going to clamber out of this one. One of the things our Roger and his family did, I think late 1100s, is they built a deer park, which was what the name suggests. It was an enclosed area in which I think he was given 6 or 7 deer from somewhere near Kingscliff, but the rest of them were just wild deer that got into the park, and that was for providing food during winter months, but also for deer hunting and to impress the sort of nobility around here. It cost a bit of money apparently back in those days to have a deer park. You had to pay the king a good shilling or 100 shillings plus to have a deer park, or in effect to have a license for a deer park. My interest in this one is there was an old lodge there built around the 1300s. It's gone, but apparently there are still sites or elements on the ground that show that it was there. I don't know what that means, but it's got me going curiosity wise. I saw it on an old map where it said site of lodge house, and I'm going to try and find it if I can. It's somewhere about half a mile away from here, so I'm going to try and trek over there stealthily and see what is still there. That's without a map. Now, I think this lodge house, again bearing in mind I haven't got a map, is on the left hand or the very left corner ish of that bit of woodland over there. So that's what I'm going to try and get down to. Don't try this one at home, children, because it's not a public footpath, as far as I'm aware anyway. So my apologies to anybody watching this who says, hey, that's my land. I won't be here long, I promise. That didn't work. I got part way across and there was a guy in a tractor in the field coming towards me, so I thought, nope, reverse, get out of there. I wouldn't have made it to the woods before he made it to me. He may not have been bothered, but I think there's another way in, so I'm going to delay it a little bit and head round to the road, because I think there's a track that might get me in there. So I haven't given up. We'll try again. I think those buildings in the distance are part of, I'd call it the hamlet of Ashton, which we've got to pass through. I mean, there's nothing there that really merits sticking around apart from some listed buildings relating to the farm, which I think was 1800s. And I suspect that's those over there, which look quite cute. Alright, mate. Anything to get on my videos, eh? Yeah. Cute or what? Oh, noisy. Cute. Right, I should be going right here, but I'm going to go left because I want to try and find that track. Quiet lane ends. Is it going to get noisy then? brace yourself. This looks like my path. I really shouldn't be doing this. I'm sneaking through these woods to where I think this site is. And there's a lot of people moving around, farm people, so I've got to be careful. Crazy. Oh, that wasn't easy, but I found it. I put up an illustration of what it's thought to have looked like. It's thought to date to around about early 1300s. And it was a lodge house. It's been called a manor house, it's been called a castle. It's a lodge house. I suspect the person that lived here had a responsibility for looking after the deer park. Some of the original stonework's still there. These walls were about 1.75 metres thick. It was a robust, I think 20 metres square, I read somewhere, lodge house. There you go. We got there. There used to be a waterway here, or pool. Used to be a duck decoy at one point. It's still here by the looks. I think it was a duck breeding pool originally, and then it became a duck decoy, ironically, where they'd catch duck. Probably to feed the, probably to feed our Roger, who knows. It's still there. Right, I'm very uneasy being in here, so I'm going to make my escape now, in the hope I don't get seen. Done it. I don't like doing that. Don't like doing that, but it's a long way to walk and shy away and not see what you've come to see as far as that site is concerned. That's the 1300s building, and I wanted to see what was left of it. Bainton village is where we're going next. I have no idea really where to go because I've got no map, but it's somewhere to my left. So as soon as we get back into Ashton, I'm just going to hook left, and hopefully next time I see you, we'll be in Bainton. Old building, new building. I think it's an old building actually, with modifications. The bit on the right definitely looks old. It's probably one of the listed buildings around here. But I'll say it definitely is. The Gamekeeper's Cottage it's called. Bainton Green Road, that must be a clue. It's a lovely house. That's got to be listed as well. Berry Cottage. Nice. I presume this is still Ashton, I don't really know. The joys of having no map, but I suspect it might still be Ashton. That lovely blue shed stroke summer house stroke kids house. I want one of them. Lovely cottage coming up. Looks like it probably was 2 cottages before, at a guess, or maybe one with an extension. Rose cottage, very nice. A posh one, is that an old one? I don't know. Joys of having no map. That looks quite modern actually. Nicely done though. First house, Ashton. Yeah, des res as they say. I couldn't even afford the gates. That's a big one. I see a church spire over there. This must be Bainton, and if it ain't Bainton, we are totally lost. It's got to be Bainton. There's nothing else out here. That's a nice willow tree. Wonder how old that is. Superb. Definitely Bainton. That's a relief. I'm going to go and find a pub first. Sadly not a pub that's still open. A former pub. Building coming up on the left used to be the Boar. The Boar pub closed in 1964. Dates to, well they say 1800s, but apparently architects say it goes back to 1700s, so one or the other. But yeah, that used to be the Boar Inn. I'll put up an old picture of it in a sec. And that's the same shot today. Right, heading down the oldest part really of Bainton, which is Church Lane, which has a church and 1 or 2 other buildings down there. Yeah, got to be a sit down job I think. Bainton Church, like most churches in the area, dates back to the sort of early Norman period, 1200s. A lot of modifications in the 1300s and 1400s. This week's gravestone investigation. That's Robert Sandy, who died on February the 6th, 1889, aged 72. Also of, oh, it's going to be a tough one. And somebody might be able to read it at home, 1888. See what we can find out. Nice tower. St Mary's, Bainton. RB was here. No idea of the age, but probably dates back to near the beginning, 1200s, just after. The tall buildings on the left coming up is a school, the old school and the schoolhouse, I think built 1870s if I remember rightly. No idea when it closed. But that's an original door as well. There might be a date stone on it somewhere, but not unless it's on the end. Erected by Lord Kesteven, 1876. There you go. The old schoolroom and the schoolhouse. The building in the centre there used to be the old post office, closed in 1974. Just going to get a close-up of it in a minute and match it up with this photograph from the 1880s. There you go, the gate still stands. No idea what that is, but it's old. Love that porch. Buttercross Cottage. And here's the village cross with the dustbin, spoiling the view. Don't know how old the base layers are, but the bit on the top is the medieval part, the oldest part of the cross. Just the flat hexagonal base and the vertical part. I think the round bit on the top isn't medieval. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not. It would have been a tall cross that went up about 6 foot above that hexagonal base, but obviously, as with most of them, the bulk of it's disappeared. But that's the medieval bit mounted on something more recent. Thought there might be a plaque somewhere that might explain dates a bit better, but no. Building on the right there, as you can see, is the old bakery, or more specifically the bakehouse element of the old bakery, which goes back to the 1700s. Quite a big bakehouse. On the left coming up we have one of Mr. Sir Giles Gilbert Scott's design red kiosks. It's still got a phone in it. It still has a phone in it. I wonder if it works. Brilliant. Do you remember Orton Waterville in the old reading room that we found, or what was left of it? Well, great big sign on the left, the Bainton reading room. I think dates to 1910. It does date to 1910, because just see the sign up there. There you go. I don't know what it is now, probably a village hall. But it was a reading room where people came to read whatever was around in 1910. I just kind of love the concept of people getting together just to read newspapers and the likes. Doesn't look that old, but it's obviously been done up. Better view of the old bakehouse. Intrigued by those metal beam rods there, as to why there would be beams at that level. Be quite intriguing to see inside there. Gotta find the road to Ufford now. Just coming down to the Bainton Sheepwash, which we've never featured a sheepwash before in a video. This actually dates back to medieval times, but was used right up to, I think it was the 1950s. It's been recently restored from probably what was an overgrown state, but it's still fascinating to see. They used to reverse the sheep into these pens filled with water from the dike, wash dike, that runs alongside it, and then they'd have these broom-like things they'd use to scrub the sheep before letting them out up a ramp. There's a sheep wash, or one of them. I don't know if there were several. I can only see one that's still visible. Maybe there was only one. There's all sorts of half-buried stone structures, so I can't really tell you too much about how it worked. But this was wash dike, or still is wash dike, which supplied the water, which somehow came from here into that pit over there, and I suspect it came through here somehow. Don't ask me how though. Just looking away from the pit now, you can see actually there is a sort of small valley, call it what you will, ditch. I suspect the water would have come through here. Which means somehow it would have come from wash dike. How it got up to this level, I do not know. It looks like it probably did come from here somehow. And then down through there. Yeah, unusual. Right, this is a mystery. This is marked very boldly and clearly on maps as a former site or a site of a former manor house, and it's accepted that there was a manor house here of sorts, and it was moated, as in it was fortified, as in it had a moat running around it, which kind of substantiates the fact that it was something important. The manor house was up there, the moat, as you can see. I'll tell you more about the moat in a minute. But the mystery is, you know, this is still part of our Roger's lands at Torpel, and his manor house, we know, was at that lumps and bumps site, the Torpel site. So who was here? Did he have a second manor house? This is believed to date back to the beginning of the 1100s, so early, probably even before the Torpel site was built, or the Torpel Manor house was built. Was it just an important person, Roger's second in command and that sort of stuff? The truth is we don't know. But the manor house sat here in front of us. In fact, we'll probably be in it now. And the moat ran around it, and probably still runs all the way around if I move across to the other side. It's believed this one finished around about 1400s, late 1400s, early 1500s, because Bainton House, and I don't know where Bainton House is. I could even be looking at it in the distance there. I don't know. That's a mighty big house. The Bainton House was built then, and that became the manor house, and this became redundant. But early 1100s into 1500s, this was apparently a manor house, a moated manor house. Yeah, moat is still there. So this was big. Now the moat wouldn't survive as you see it now. It fills in, and it did fill in for what, 800 years or so. It just naturally filled in. You could still see the depression in the ground, but there was no water. But the landowner, I think it was in the 1980s, I read somewhere, dug it all back out again, which was good. You know, lets people know what it was, rather than just say that shallow was a moat. Yeah, he's dug it out. It is now a glorious moat, as it should be, and as it was. So yeah, it was dug out in the 1980s, but it's genuine, it's not fake, it's real. But I couldn't tell you anything more about this manor house. I don't think anybody really understands it. I've read quite a few bits on what it might have been, and no one really knows. But there was a big house here that was called a manor house. We just don't know who lived there. The building up ahead on the right is Poplar Farmhouse, which dates back to, I think it's the late 1700s. Of particular interest, on the side of the sort of gable there is a semicircular construction sticking out the bottom of the wall. That used to be an oven, a very old oven, and a mighty big oven, I would suggest as well. Not seen one of those before. Be nice to see the inside of that one. These mighty tall walls on the right, they also date back to the 1700s and used to be the walls that went round the old kitchen garden of Ufford Hall, which is the big house in this village. Yeah, there used to be a sort of, well, I suppose all posh houses had kitchen gardens, but I'm told the kitchen garden isn't there anymore. but these walls went around it. These rather smart flats used to be hard to imagine. They used to be the stable blocks for Ufford Hall. Certainly been smartened up now, from stable blocks to very nice flats, apartments. And that is Ufford Hall. Built in 1734, but it's believed there was an older manor house sat on this site, going back to something like the 1400s. I think it used to be called Uphall. So the site itself goes back further than this house does. But 1734, built by George Manners, one of the sons of the Duke of Rutland. That's very nice. I could live there. Des Res. Another very grand wall, going back a few hundred years. Nice little porchway on that door as well. Just a nice village, Ufford, really. Full of history. Laundry cottage. I think it was the mid-1800s from what I read. Most of these cottages on the right are 1700s cottages. The oldest cottage in the village, in fact the oldest surviving building in the village probably, certainly the oldest residence in the village, is Dovecot Cottage, which dates back to the 1600s, and that's this one. "400 years old." Coming up on our right is the old forge, smithy, blacksmith, call it what you will. It's still called the old forge. The actual blacksmith, the actual smithy, is the single-storey building, which still looks very much like a smithy. Hasn't been spoilt a whole lot. Late 1700s, that one. And that one, which is a 1700s barn conversion, walnut house. It's the only thatched cottage left. If you imagine most of these were thatched originally, that's the last thatch in the village. I think that's actually a house, not a barn conversion. I did it an injustice there, the barn conversion sitting in front of it with its ventilation slits. A site familiar to many of you, the White Hart pub. Inn, call it what you will. On the left was an 1800s stable block, on the right the 1700s house. Excuse the cars. Yeah, so the house is the older part. In the centre of the picture there is the roof of Ufford Hall, and the posh folks that lived there, if they were coming to church, or when they were coming to church, they wouldn't be joining the riffraff and walking along the road. They had their own private path that used to bring them through those woods, through those gateways right in the centre of the picture there, which we will be going down to in a moment, because you just have to see those. I mean, the one in particular is spectacular. And then presumably they came up here to a gateway that's no longer here, and up to the church. the posh route in. Right, here we go. This was the, I don't know what you call it, gateway, gatehouse, out of Ufford Park, up from Ufford Hall, to get to the church, basically. It's a sort of Gothic, I don't know, Gothic Jacobean style. It actually only dates to about 1700s, early 1800s, but yeah, brilliant. Very nicely done, whoever did that. I don't know if you can see over the wall, I can't, but you might be able to. Very nice. And there used to be a matching one on the other side until it fell apart. There's a bit remaining of it, but only a bit. There you go. But that used to be just as grand until it fell over. Right, that's 9 miles done. My legs are falling apart, and there's a pub nearby. Although I will resist the temptation, I promise you. Very tempting nonetheless. As ever, I hope you found something to enjoy, slightly different than recent walks. I certainly enjoyed it. It was quite a relaxing walk in what was nearly summer, and I can take that. Bit of blue sky, bit of sunshine. Very nice. Yeah, hope you enjoyed something, and any comments, as ever, put them on the YouTube underneath the video, or if you're on Peterborough Images on Facebook, then make your post there. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.